Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Zoom talk this evening, which is by Paul Gallier. We're very pleased to have Paul with us this evening to talk on the Malta Railway. He's had a very varied career. He started at the University of Malta, and he's been abroad working in a number of different places, but his interest in the railway started in 1980. Mind you, some may wonder why Malta needed a railway, but I'm sure Paul is going to tell us why in his talk.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening from Malta. I can see that there is a particular chap also from Malta who happens to be a friend of mine and the son of somebody who taught me so much about the beloved Malta Railway. And I'd like to take this particular opportunity to remember his father, Joe's father, Nicola Zoppardi. I am sure some of you who have visited Malta have either visited or heard about Nicole's private Malta Railway Museum in Attard. Okay, I thank you for the invitation, friends of Valletta. Valletta, being the capital city of Malta, was very important and is still very important, as much as the capital city, Mdina, was important for Malta in the days gone by. The purpose of the Malta Railway, which started in 1883 till 1931, was to connect the two cities, the old city of Mdina with Valletta. So that way, the two cities would be connected. It was in the early 80s that the industrial mechanical revolution all over Europe, mainly in UK, brought to Malta two particular feats of transport related to industrial mechanical revolution. These were both connected with transport. One transported, which was the Malta Railway, that was a means of transport which moved horizontally. The other one was the Baraka lift, which moved upright and down, which connected the main city of Valletta to the Grand Harbour. And we know that in those days, all the cargo, all traveling was made on sea by means of ships. Eventually, in Malta, the transport on land was either by using mules, horses, or otherwise using your own 2 feet. The railway was meant to cut down the traveling time. For example, to travel on horseback or on a carriage, or on a horse-driven carriage from Valletta to Mdina, it would have taken you a good 3.5 hours. With the new means of transport, it would take you about 20 to 25 minutes the most. Initially, the railway, as we can see on the route, ran from Valletta to Rabat, just underneath Aya Hill. Thank you, Peter. And that was the terminus. But after the railway ended up in the government's hands due to bankruptcy, due to having financial problems, the government decided to extend the route to Imtarfa. Actually, we call it Imtarfa, but the idea was to service the newly built barracks, Royal Naval Hospital, to provide a service for those living at the barracks in Tarfa. A new station was built, and it was called Museum Station because it's about just 150 meters away from the Roman villa, which was a museum, which is a museum actually. And just before those times, it was found by certainly Zamnit. Okay, the route, as you can see, there was only one route, but there were projections for the route to extend towards the north and also towards the south. It never materialized because it ran just for about 49 years in all. What we can see, the slide we can see, was the route as drawn by Brigadier Rigby. Brigadier Rigby, the writer of the book, The Malta Railway, which is, as far as we are concerned, it is our Bible. If we start going through the stations, let's start from Valletta. This was the building of the railway station. The station was in the ditch itself, but this was the main building, which was next to the Royal Opera House. So those at the Royal Opera House had no problems to travel back home if they were using the railway. They didn't even have to go out. They could go straight from the theatre down a flight of steps and move straight to the platforms where the train would be waiting for their journey that particular evening. We have to bear in mind that in those days, entertainment on the island was very much limited. And the main theatre, productions of operas and so on, the famous operas that we hear about, most of the operas that took place in Italy eventually came down to Malta. And that was the role of theatre. This was the first bridge at the terminus in Valletta. You can see the old entrance to the city of Valletta, which was very much adequate with the rest of the bastions that surround the city of Valletta. The bridge, as you can see, was very bad, but eventually it was a wooden bridge, as it was specified by the Ministry of Defence in UK. In case there was an assault, an attack on Valletta, they would just axe the bridge from the Valletta side and set it on fire. And we can see a photo of the original railway bridge. The photos we are seeing are the original photos, which have been colored by one of the board members of the foundation, our artist Edgar Vella, obviously thanks to Photoshop. This was the bridge, and the bridge connected the terminus itself. Maybe a number of us have heard that it used to unhouse the yellow garage. Nowadays it's part of Parliament House, and the Speaker is setting up an archives and a bar for the members. Maybe we will be donating a pole, not the pole dancer, they will provide the pole dancer. Anyway, this is another view of the terminus, and notice that by this time it was no longer wooden, as it started to rot, and obviously they built a dry stone bridge. Besides, they put in platforms on each side, 1 meter wide, to be able to unhouse, to provide a better area and sort of breathing space for those who wanted to go down, have a seat, maybe wait for the train, or read a book, or somebody who wanted during the darker hours of the evening court his lady there. The engine we can see is a bare peacock. And this is the photo of the terminus when, you know, very recently, just about 2010, whilst we were filming the documentary for the Malta Railway. It was a tunnel in the form of a cave, and it was deep, so one could see, like we're seeing now, also the entrance towards the exit from the theatre. The next slide, we can see the drawing of the station, and on the left-hand side, down left-hand side, we can also see a turntable. This was proposed, but it was never installed. So the train, when it arrived in Valletta, it uncoupled from the carriages, moved forward on a siding, reversed on this siding, and again went to the main, moved to the main track, moved backwards as such, because the chimneys were set all in front after the 1900, and so they were set facing Mdina, facing the Rabat and Mdina area. So they were pulling when they're going up to Mdina, and they were pulling again on the way, on the return journey. The difference was that the engine moved from front to what we call the rear of the train, but it was moving, although steam did not, I mean, there's the same power, it was moving in reverse, but it was always pulling and not pushing. On the right-hand side, we can see the stairway down to the platforms from the station. This building was demolished completely during the 60s to make room for the new entrance, for the new city gate to Valletta. Personally, I think it was a mistake, a disaster. This is a view from the terminus side, and we are looking at the entrance through the tunnel, which tunnel is considered to be part of Floriana, where it then housed also the only underground station of the Malta Railway, which was situated in Floriana. This station was situated just almost underneath Connaught House and the Anglican Church. And as we can see on this slide, on the right-hand side, we can see one Vignacourt fountain. I'm sure you've heard of the aqueduct that delivered water from Rabat to Valletta. And this Vignacourt fountain, we can see the tower besides the fountain, which helped to build up pressure and could move the water from Floriana towards Valletta. These are landmarks. There's also Sarria Church, which are next to Argotti Gardens and St. Philip Gardens. And the station was underneath St. Philip's Garden. This is the station, almost as it is today. The difference is that on at the center towards the right-hand side, we can see a blocked entrance to the platform. The platform was on the right-hand side. We can still see part of it. Recently, just before the COVID, we opened that blocking of the exit and entrance, and so one can move to see the stairs, the stairway. The stairway during the Second World War also served as classrooms for the Floriana children, Floriana primary school children, to receive their lessons. This is the tunnel mouth from where the train came out from Floriana. There was another bridge. One can see also the remains of the bridge, which bridge there was what we call the parapet, and also a guard hut, which we'll eventually see it later on. This is a very interesting photograph of 1903, depicting the royal visit to Malta by King Edward VII. And we can, besides the carriage carrying King Edward VII, which has already passed from Port de Bombs, we can see on the rear, on the background, where Peter is pointing out, the mentioned bridge, which was along the tunnel mouth, and that is where the train emerged. But the train emerged further on through a tiny tunnel where you have another bastion, and this is what we've just seen was the guard hut, and this is that's the guard hut, and that we can see the tunnel mouth from where the train went in, from where today there is the police garages, and moved out on the Fosse Bridge, on the Fosse Bray Bridge. This is the remains of the Fosse Bray Bridge. It's still there, and we are going to see a very interesting slide now, which will be showing. Eventually, this is from 2010, from Pope Benedict XVI visit, and as the Pope Mobile passes through the main road called National Road, we can see the bridge further down to our right, and eventually, if we follow straight to the bridge went through the bastion and then again into the bastion, or otherwise vice versa, it came out. The bridge, a dry stone bridge, which also formed part of the bridge which crossed over a particular road. Here we can see also the tracks laid over a Google shot, which shows going through two bastions and moving over towards Tabraxia Cemetery. This crossed a bridge, a steel bridge, which was laid over a particular road, which still bears the same name today. This was called, and this is still called, Princess Melita Road. It was named after Princess Victoria Melita because she was the only monarch that was ever born in Malta. Obviously, the Maltese were so proud that they wanted to keep the name of Princess Melita. This is the same bridge, and here we can note that there had already started the buses. We can see a blue bus if we look underneath the steel bridge, thank you, Peter, which was going elsewhere. There was an issue with this bridge with the government, especially initially when we had double-deckers. Double-deckers could not go underneath that bridge. They wanted the government to do something about it, but obviously the decision was it will remain as it is. The buses had to go on an alternative route. Eventually, we have a nice, this is about Princess Victoria Melita, and here we have something very, very interesting. We can see in the background, towards the left-hand side, a whitish building, more central, Peter. That is Port de Bombs. Through Port de Bombs ran as from 1905, the Malta tramways, and they ran parallel to the rail track. The rail track, we can see, and as you can note, there is a military officer and a lady walking next to the rail track. Most probably, they were walking and waiting for the train. If the train was coming, if they wanted to board the train, they would just put their hand out and the train would slow down and allow them to board the train. It wasn't allowed to do any alighting in the same way unless it came to a station or a platform. The railway from there moved towards Milan, and that Milan, there was a particular football ground, and as we can see, there's a Scots regiment band playing. Most probably it was halftime of the game. When the train arrived next to this football ground, eventually it slowed down, and if there was some action about to be concluded, it's also stopped for a few seconds, and if there was a conclusion and a goal, most probably you could hear on the railway people shouting "Goal!" too. So yes, the Scots, the military, really had their roles, their fun, and everything on the island of Malta. From there, it moved to Hamrun. Hamrun was the heart of the Malta Railway. It had the workshops, there was a railway station, there were the sheds, there was everything. Everything was brought down to Hamrun for the nighttime. This is the station itself. And in the station, we can see that the train is pulling in the backward position in a reverse mode, which means that it's going up to Valletta. The journey is from Rabat to Valletta. If it was on the other side, on the other track, the train would have been on the front of the set of carriages. This is Hamrun. The train is again traveling to Valletta, going over an embankment in Hamrun, which is no longer there. It's gone, but we'll eventually see a shot of where it was, which was next to what nowadays there is a church dedicated to Saint Francis, and there was also a platform where we can see on the right hand side, we can see one tree. There is more than one tree, actually palm. There was a platform there, and it used to be the Imsida platform. So the Imsida platform was just where opposite the church, where one can see the palm trees on the right hand side. Here we see the train leaving Birkirkara, which is the next station, moving towards what we nowadays call Psaila Street. The building with the niche there and the saint is still there, but we can notice that this is engine number 4, which was a saddle tank engine, and which was later modified. And it was the period where the trains were laid down on the tracks differently, some facing Valletta, other facing Rabat. Engine number 4 was at the moment facing Valletta. One can also see the chain to alarm people not to cross, and obviously the horse and the cart carrying Maltese limestone had to wait for the train to go through, to pass by. Here we are in Birkirkara. This is Birkirkara station, and this is another interesting slide where one can see a Bear Peacock engine, which is advancing, entering Birkirkara. But on the right, on the left-hand side, at the bottom corner almost, we can see a green box. Peter is pointing out that green box. That was a particular box which served as a letterbox. People traveling on the train, people at the stations could mail in that letterbox their correspondence, their cards, their whatever, greeting cards, you name it. And it was distributed along the island, and those being sent overseas or naturally were sent overseas. Notice the clothing, which was quite number one dresses. Those people who traveled on the train normally wore their number one dress to go on the train. It was a novelty, it was something different. This is also Birkirkara. Notice that the train, whilst the other train was on its way to Rabat, this train is on its way to Valletta. It's next to the station. There is a particular lamp post, which we can see, which also has a water spout. We all know that steam engines use water and mainly coal. Being the central station, where normally two trains met and all, it had supplies of water and also supply of coal. And this is where, in that building, we shall be having our Malta Railway Museum. The railway moves from Birkirkara, it moves further on towards Balsan, but before reaching Balsan, it passed by a very important building, St. Aloysius College, which is in Birkirkara itself. On the left-hand side, on the bottom of the left-hand side, one can see the tracks which ran parallel to the college. Here we have a closer, and it's in color, and we can see the tracks. Students remain playing on the tracks to see who was the last person on the tracks before the train arrived. From there, it moved onwards on the way to Balsan through mainly countryside. One can see also the aqueduct, which was very much visible in those days. Now it's all buildings, you can't see a thing. And obviously, when it went through the countryside, sometimes with sparks and all, there was fire caused, and obviously the farmers weren't happy when their crops caught fire. So, you know, not everybody was that happy with the railway service. From there, it reached Balsan. Balsan had another stop, which was called San Antonio. As you can hear, most of the names, or rather all the names of the stations, were in Italian. Even originally, there wasn't a timetable, there was an orario, but given time, it was switched to timetable. This was the stop at Balsan, which was the stop if you wanted to go to San Anton Gardens. I'm sure some of you have been, where there is also the presidential palace. This is where you stop for the gardens. But if at the time the Governor General was traveling on the train, it wouldn't stop here. It would stop at Attardo station, which was further on. From here, the train moved over an embankment, which is this embankment. It went behind Corinthia Palace Hotel, and it went over another steel bridge before it entered. This is the steel bridge, which is no longer there. Even the supporting columns are not over there, but the embankment has been restored, and one can go and see the embankment, have a closer look, and Obviously, it's one of the relics that we have of the railway. From here, it moved to San Anton station, sorry, to Attardo station. This is Attard station. Attard was one of the stations which had only the original track without any sidings. The reason was that since it was in an inclined position, they were afraid that if it was raining, if there was bad weather, the train would slide. It would slide down. Obviously, at Attard station, the foundation has insisted that once funds have been given, have been granted, we would have a station replica. And I would like also to mention that a replica of the station, a model of the station, has been very, very well built. It's magnificent, thanks to Joseph Azzopardi, who is with us during this talk. And if you come to Malta, you must see Joe's station as well. I'll get your 20 euros afterward, Joe. From here, it moved further and it moved to another place called, another station called San Salvatore. Now this San Salvatore, further from San Salvatore, the train crossed the main road, which is Mdina Road. And Mdina Road is the main road to Rabat. And there were complaints by people who went over the tracks with their mule and cart. They were damaging the wheels, the metal on the outer of on the circumference of the wheel, and they were also damaging the tracks. So the government decided to build a bridge, a flyover. It was one of the flyovers that we had. And this is San Salvatore. It also had a siding where one could leave, if there was a feast, they could leave some carriages down without having to go to Valletta and Mdina, and they use them accordingly, especially on feast days. Further up, we can see here another train traveling on an embankment, which was between Zabouch area and eventually the Notabile station in Rabat. The train again here is moving, is on the return journey, and the engine is another Bear Peacock engine. On the next slide, we shall see the remains of one of the pass-throughs within the embankment. There were several, because when it went through fields, the farmer had to have access from one end to the other end of their fields. And eventually, slowly, we get down, or we arrive at Notabile station. This is what we know as Racecourse Street. The reddish or pinkish building on the right-hand side, that is the station. Notice that the cabs, horse-driven cabs, are waiting there because people who needed to travel on from the terminus elsewhere, like going to Dingley, they took the cabby. This is the station at Notabile, which was situated in a valley. And on the background, we can see the tunnel mouth of the tunnel that was dug and provided the extension to Imtar Fasai. One can see also a ramp on towards the center, which is next to the waiting room of the building. So people could take up goods, or if they wanted to use the ramp, they could use the ramp. On the right-hand side, sorry, on the left-hand side of the building, you can see the ramp there. There was also the stairways and the office, the ticketing office outside, which is still outstanding there. Here we can see one of the trains, which is moving from Notabile now. It's about to enter the tunnel underneath Mdina and will arrive at Museum Station. Right, a very interesting photograph showing the inauguration of the Malta Railway. Note how many people are there, onlookers. There were a number of VIPs invited. There was also Governor Barton, Sir Barton there, who inaugurated the railway. Besides, there was also a number of clergy people. This is another photo, but this time in color. And obviously, there was also a small reception. Note that the ticketing office on the right-hand side wasn't yet built as it is, but we can see the stairway, the steps leading to the road on the side, which is called Racecourse Street, and it's still named Racecourse Street. From there, we move to the tunnel. This is the tunnel mouth itself on the Rabat side. The train moved into the tunnel to emerge on the other side, where we refer to it here. We can see the inside of the tunnel, plus one of the vents as such. The top right-hand photo shows as soon as the train entered the tunnel, there were a number of magazines, which magazines during the Second World War served as magazines for ammunition and also for fuel, since Ta'ali is not that far from where the tunnel is situated. Sorry, I said the right hand. The left hand side was eventually the tunnel mouth, which we will see in the next slide, from where the train emerged to Museum Station. This photo was taken from inside the tunnel, and Museum Station is just outside the tunnel. We all refer to the Museum Station. Here is the train approaching from the tunnel mouth to the station. We all refer to it as Mtarfa, but the area is purely a valley between Mdina and Mtarfa, but it's part of Rabat. This is the station which we are talking about, Museum Station. Note, on the left-hand side, we can see an engine moving forward after being decoupled from the carriages to move to a siding, reverse, and then move back and to be recoupled. And here we can see on the left-hand side, the train moving forward, going over a pit. There is a pit, thank you, Peter, there, which served as an ash pit and an inspection pit, moved forward, recoupled, and then started the journey back towards Valletta. Right, another interesting photo is the crew. There were a number of photos taken at Museum Station. Actually, there is an officer which is standing in front of a pole next to another officer, and that officer happens to be the grandfather of an ex-minister in Malta, whose daughter is currently the mayor of Birkirkara. So we're working together about the station, and that person happened to be ex-minister De Bolo Greg's grandfather, as such. Also notice the dressing of the people. In this photo, this slide, we can see very interesting, to the left-hand side, next to the tracks, there is the changeover lever for the tracks to be able to move from the main line to the siding, and another one on the other side so that the train could move back to the main track. Here we have, this is a photo of a painting. Note that the carriages are not green, they are brownish. Originally, when they got to Malta, they were teak. Inside, they remained teak. If you come to Malta, I can show you they restored the only remaining carriage which is restored, and inside it is teak. But this is the color that eventually, when the train started operating, they were all in teak. Because of the varnish and everything, because of the temperatures, high temperatures during the summer months in Malta, it was decided that they would paint them, and they opted for green, that olive green, which was the same color used by British Railways as well. So far, this was one of the engines, one of the of the many warded engines. We had 3 engines of these. Besides, there was a Black Hawthorne, which was number 4 engine, which came as a saddle tank and eventually ended up as a side tank engines, because that was adequate for Malta. And we also had 2 other manning warders, number 5 and number 6. Number 5, sorry. And we had 4 Bayard Peacocks, 7, 8, 9, and 10. These were the best engines that we had in Malta. That their performance was excellent for our island. The next slide, we can see more vividly the inspection pit at Museum Station. We reckon that the inspection pit is still there, it's just buried underneath. So if we were to excavate, we would still find it. Another photo of carts going underneath the steel bridge in Princess Melita Street or Princess Melita Road. There are a few more slides which we can see, and then I think I'm overrunning.
So shall I go forward to the stamps one for Graham?
All right. This was one of the engines, and this was a painting. About 100 were issued on the centenary, 100th anniversary, back in 1983, painted by Richard Caruana, who is a famous aviation and stamps artist in Malta. Besides this, there were also issued a set of 3 stamps depicting engines from the Malta Railway for the centenary. On our website, on our Facebook pages and all. Oh, there they are. Thank you, Peter. Most kind of you. They are still available, even on eBay, and also those of you who'd like to obtain a copy of them. If you want, I can provide you with a digital copy. And all on our Facebook pages, all these photos and many more are available and could be downloaded. And you can see the carriages and other engines, a number of interesting places, or the stations themselves. Some of them look like this carriage, which was a first-class carriage. The carriage that we have was a third-class carriage, the one that we have at Birkirkara station. They are nice to see. and people enjoyed traveling on them. I think we can, yes, this is a very good point.
I can put the PowerPoint on our webpage so people can see it later.
Yes, yes, yes. I have also sent a copy of the documentary, The Malta Railway. It's in English and in Maltese. So those of you who want to hear the Maltese version can. I'm sure that the committee, Peter and the crowd there would also make them available for you to view at your convenience. If there are any questions, I would gladly try to answer them.
Has anybody got their hand up, Peter, or is anybody asking a question?
Yeah,
Alan Green wants to ask a question.
yes, I noticed, Paul, excellent talk. There doesn't appear to be any signalling on the line.
Any signalling? Actually, there was one semaphore which was situated in Hamrun. That was the only signal there was. All other signals were done by the guards at the guards hut. If there was something, if there was a danger, if there was a caution, they would go out and flag it out for the engine driver to look up to it. In Hamrun, because Hamrun, as I said, was the main heart, and they had all the carriages there, all the engines in their sheds there. So there was a lot of movement taking place in Hamrun. Plus, they moved carriages and engines to the maintenance workshops and all. So there was quite some movement, and there was the only signal in Hamrun.
There's a question from Richard Plowman. Richard, please unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. And once again, a lovely talk. And I think one or two questions that came to mind is that where were the locomotives made? Were they actually imported? Because they look like German type of designs, but were they? Where did the locos come from? Do you know?
All engines and rolling stock came from UK.
From the
also,
UK. All right.
Also, the tracks, for example, they came from Harrow.
Right, so they're okay. It's just that they don't look very much like our standard UK engines. That's
yes,
all.
yes. As a matter of fact, the Bayer Peacock ones were very similar, besides the cabin, of the ones that they ran on Isle of Man, I believe.
Ah, right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the cabin was different. I guess it was.
Yeah, and so was the gauge a straightforward standard gauge then?
It was a meter gauge.
Yeah. Okay.
A meter gauge.
Question from David Moore.
Thank you.
David Moore.
Paul, I wondered whether there are any surviving images of freight trucks, and also what was the source of the coal for the locos? Thank you.
Right, David. Thank you for the question, and I thank all the others for the questions as well. Richard and who forgot the first name of David. There are no surviving. The only thing that survived is the carriage, one carriage, third class carriage, which has been restored. We have built a glass shed for it to protect it from the elements and from vandals. Unfortunately, on this island, we still have a lot of vandals. We need, I think, one of the funds that we need from the EU is to educate people, not just academically, but the way how to behave and how to appreciate history and what our forefathers have looked after for our sake. To me, that is important. We have in Floriana, in the Floriana tunnel, we have 2 broken luggage, what do you call them? Carts, sort of, luggage trolleys.
Trolleys, maybe.
Trolleys. We have not moved them from there yet, because I don't want them moved until we are about to restore them. The moment you move them from one place to the other, somebody makes them his or destroys them. You see?
There was a question about the coal. David asked, where did the coal come from?
The coal came from UK.
From UK, oh, right.
And this is one of the reasons why they say that the end of the railway came to an end because it went bankrupt. I say that it was within the interest of local and British entrepreneurs which had business on the island, that it suited them best to import buses and cars, because from buses and cars, they made some money. But as far as the railway was concerned, the railway was self-contained. It had its own workshops, it had its own engineers, it had its own apprentices, it done its own tapestry, own carpentry, all engineering. So it had the company had the employees, or rather the government had the employees that they did all the job. They imported the tracks because the tracks were changed 3 times with 3 different weights, catering for 3 different weights. So anything they needed, tracks, sleepers, coal, any supplies, they brought them from UK. Even steel to be worked on in the workshops, to be used in the workshops, they came from UK. And nobody made a penny of them. So this is my personal opinion, it suited entrepreneurs to make sure to introduce another means of transport.
Paul, there's a question from Franz Stadelman.
Yes, Franz.
Yes, well done. Thank you. And greetings from Switzerland.
Oh, hello, Switzerland.
My question is, could you tell us some words about the tramway and its competition with the railway?
The tramway started in 1905, whilst the train started in 1883. And it was another means of transport. Instead of running on steam, this time it needed power. So a power station was built. Maybe in future we can have a talk and I can prepare some slides also. The power station, part of the power station is still in Marsa in a very bad situation. And eventually it ran on 3 routes: Valletta to Zabuc, Valletta to Birkirkara, and Valletta to Cospicua. The 3 routes were quite busy, but the tram had a number of accidents. Not that the train didn't, but it simply occurs that according to police occurrences, there were more grievous accidents with the tram as such. Now, the tram stopped 15 months before the railway. It stopped on 1 year and 3 months before the railway. It stopped at the end of December. The tram stopped in 1931, whilst the railway stopped in 1931, while the tram came to an end in 1929. Competition-wise, the tram was cheaper. The train was the fare on the train was not affordable to everybody. So basically, people who traveled on the train traveled once or twice, on a special occasion, because just to experience the train. But besides all these carriages, what the railway had was a workers' carriage. I'm sorry, I did not put in a slide of that. The workers' carriages, workers could travel very cheap, but when you look at them, they weren't workers' carriages, they were troop carriers, because 8 soldiers could board this carriage at one go. 4 from one side, 4 from the other, they moved to there, and another 4 could with their gear and everything. The British never admitted that the railway had, I'm sorry, I'm diverting slightly from your question, that the railway had a military purpose, but eventually we all know that it had, and it carried soldiers, and soldiers had special tickets, special permits to allow them to travel either free or reduced prices. But if they were traveling in uniform and with the gear, besides, they used also the railway after 8 o'clock in the evening to move ammunition and armor from the Floriana Valletta area to Tarfa, to Museum Station. From there, they were offloaded and loaded onto mules, later on also on lorries, on trucks, on vehicles, to move them towards the northern defense system of the island, the Victoria Lines.
Paul, may I just ask, if you don't mind, you've mentioned the timings. What time of day did the railway start in the morning and finish in the evening?
Right, there were different timings. Normally, there would be an 8 o'clock return journey from Mdina, from Tarfa area to Valletta. In the morning, they started quite early. If I'm not mistaken, they started at about 5 o'clock, the first journey. So by 4 o'clock in the morning, they were already starting the engines in Hamroon and getting ready for it all, because the engines, one had to be coupled and the train had to move up to Rabat, in Tarfa area, and the other one to move to Valletta. So they both left the area, met in Birkirkar and continued their way. They were very frequent. Besides, on feast days, there was an increase of the number of carriages on the train, and also service-wise, the schedule varied on feast days, and especially the feast of St. Paul, Imnaria, and a few other feasts, which are synonymous to Maltese going for the feasts in those days.
Thank you. I think there might be one last question from Richard Plowman.
Yeah.
I think a rather sort of a question, around about 1920s, the companies in the UK, the railway companies, were trying to find how fast they could make their trains go. I just wondered, what was the maximum speed you managed to get out of the railways in the engines in Malta?
I am sorry, I have no idea whatsoever. But I'll have to look into that. Most probably it depended on what one could see on the route, what they came across on the route. If there was a football match, it would take longer, for sure. If there were people walking along the tracks and they wanted to board the train, if there was a guard hut, a guard at one of the guard huts who wanted to send something to somebody at another hut or whatever, there would be a a minor stop as well. And what we are sure of, that they were very, very adamant as far as timing was concerned, that the train leaves on time and arrives on time. So eventually, with all the stops and all, they always got there on time.
That will probably keep Franz Stadelmann very happy, being from Switzerland and Swiss
Yes.
timekeeping. Yes.
Yes. I'm not sure where the regulators came from. Most probably they came from UK, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were Swiss made.
Graham?
Paul, thank you so much. That's a lovely talk. As you know, it's being uploaded onto our website, so it will be there for anybody who didn't actually manage to join us this evening. But I'm sure that when a number of us come on our next visit, we will probably try and look at the museum to see exactly what's going on there. That may be very interesting. So thank you very much indeed.
I thank you all. Thank you for being so patient, listening to me. If at any time any one of you is coming over to Malta for a visit, please do not hesitate to give me a call.